like to welcome all of you this morning. What are we here for? We're here for effective online teaching. So this ought to be very, very interesting. How many of you have taught online? I see two hands, 1.5 hands.
Yeah, I co-taught online.
Okay, okay, so 1.5. How many of you think you might end up teaching online? But that looks pretty universal. And of course, there's a growing trend in offering online courses. So those of you who just raised your hand, you're on the wave of online education. So we're hearing from two folks who are very, very well positioned to have this discussion. So we have Michael Wilder, who is Instructional Design Coordinator, and we have Rex Suba, who's an Instructional Designer, both out of the UNLV Office of Online Education. So again, there are folks here on campus who do this stuff day and night. Well, maybe not night, I don't know.
We will teach online, so night too.
Oh, so night too. Day and night, and in other words, again, they're very well positioned to guide us through some of these topics. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of time for Q&A too at the end. So thanks to both of you for joining us, and those of you for being here.
Thank you so much for having us, and Peter introducing us. Thank you very much. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, or as Peter mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm Michael Wilder. And I did something this morning that I've always found to be useful in teaching, and that is to stand at the door and to greet the students as they come in the room, and to try to get to know everyone's names. And this comes from years ago when I used to teach middle school in inner city Los Angeles, and really as a classroom management technique, and really trying to find out how do I manage the chaos. If you imagine you've got 35 students in middle school, how is it, are you going to have some sort of handle on that? And definitely the #1 technique is to stand in the doorway and to greet people and look into their eyes and shake their hand as they come into the room. And so what happens is if someone in the back of the room is throwing spit wads or something like that, I can say, Christy, can you come on up here and have a seat up here, or something like that. Okay, so I've actually memorized everyone's name in the room already just by meeting you in as you came in and looking at the form on the front. And there are 3 individuals in the room who have their names start with some variation of Chris. And so if you'll take just a couple of seconds to turn around and greet somebody to your left, to your right, get to know their names, and try to identify who are the 3 people in the room whose name has some variation of this.
Oh, I know it's not you. I'm Millicent.
Millicent, okay.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, so you're definitely not.
Right. Hi. I'm Millicent.
I'm Chris.
What was the Chris? Millicent.
Millicent. I'm Shiori.
Shiori. Okay, lovely name, Shiori.
Peter.
I'm sure, yeah.
Hi, I'm Millicent.
I'm Christy.
Okay, Christy, it was.
So,
I'm Shiori.
Hi.
Cyril.
Cyril, nice to meet you. I'm Millicent.
Chris.
Nice to meet you. I'm Millicent too.
Christina.
There we go.
Christina, 3. I'm Millicent. Nice to meet you as well. I found him.
Wonderful. Okay, so you got a chance to meet a few people around you. You got a chance to meet, in particular, the 3 people whose names started with Chris. Okay, technique #2 is to get the students to know each other. Right? There's a community here. It's really important. If you're going to talk about getting people together for 15 weeks or 5 weeks in an accelerated fashion, how important is it that it isn't an isolated experience, right? Very important. So not only do I know you, and you know me, and now you know each other. Okay, so those are techniques that I learned in the classroom in particular. Now, how do we translate some of those techniques to online learning? Because that is really important too. So here we are today, and in particular, I wanted to really talk about the art of teaching. Not just the art of course building, so I want to differentiate between those two. We're talking about the art of teaching, and good teaching is good teaching no matter where you are, what the environment is. And so there's some techniques that work better online, and there's some techniques that work better face-to-face, but good teaching is good teaching. Getting people to know each other is a very important element of good teaching. So again, differentiating between good teaching and course building. We're not here today to really talk about just simply how do you build things online. What are the buttons? What buttons are we pushing? We're talking about the craft of teaching online. So that's what we're really talking about. And the reason why I put this photo here is this vision, this beautiful myth that I've always followed, and that is that someday I'll be out in the Riviera and I'll be able to teach online and kind of skip my pager, you know, while drinking a Corona or something like that. And yeah, so that might be possible someday. But the reality is that teaching is still a lot of work, no matter where you are. It involves interacting with human beings, right? So as long as I can sit on the beach, you know, with my computer and my Corona and still engage with other human beings, that's going to happen. But don't think it's something that you can just simply wind up like a clock. Online teaching or learning is not just something that you create as a mechanism and then you just step back and come back in 15 weeks and add up the grades and collect your paycheck. Really, online teaching and learning is something that is ongoing, is interactive, that you must really be involved in. And so we're going to talk about some of the techniques of how you do that. Something I always encourage is to really state your objectives when it comes to anything that you're going to do in terms of education, and that is really know what your target is. But here's our target today, and that is to find some techniques, to talk about some techniques about how you nurture online student success during the first week in particular, and in fact anything prior to the first week. That's so crucial. Also, how you make connections with students online, and how you can encourage student-to-student interaction. So there's our 3 objectives. And in terms of research, before I go any further, again, this is Rex Suba. Rex is an instructional designer. An instructional designer, anybody hear of the term instructional designer before? An instructional designer is somebody who is trained to build and facilitate and assist faculty in the development of their online course. Okay? We're specifically trained. Most of us have all taught before. All of us have taught online, all of us have taught face-to-face before, so it's not like we're some sort of techie in the back room who fixes printers. We really are educators, first and foremost. That's what our job is and where our passion is. It just so happens that not only do we have experience and training in teaching, but we also have training and experience teaching online. This is Dr. Hartley. Kendall Hartley is here. So something else we used to do when we were managing students in the old days, if they were tardy, we would ask them to do the hokey pokey in the class. But we'll forego.
Does that come back to haunt you?
Yes. All right. So an instructional designer isn't just a techie. An instructional designer is an educator first and foremost, and we're trained to learn about teaching. We learn about how people learn. We learn about metacognition, for example. We learn about the capacity of human memory and the mechanism of cognition. And as well, we also learn a lot about how you use the tools to be able to do that. So Rex is one of those individuals who's trained, and I'm the Instructional Design Coordinator, which is to say I am sort of the Uber instructional designer, and I used to manage the whole team. We've since changed our structure so that there's really kind of a shared management situation. In particular, I'm responsible for the quality, and so as the courses come in, I look at what what is it in terms of quality. I try to encourage higher quality of online courses too. So that's my job. And as Peter's already asked, he beat me to the punch, how many have not just taught, but how many have actually taken an online course? Great, almost everyone. And I think that as far as learning how to be a good teacher online, it's absolutely crucial that you take a course too. Because you get to see what is done well and what isn't done well, right? Can anybody share with me any of their experiences in either of those 2 cases? Where it was done well and where it wasn't done well. You don't have to name any names. Okay. Yes, sir.
I took a A&P class online through California University of Pennsylvania. By far one of the most interactive classes I ever taken.
Wow.
Compared to in classroom experience.
Wow.
The teacher was able to keep everybody engaged, everybody giving feedback back and forth on each week's assignment, and it was, I mean, and we had at least 56 students in the group, and we were able to share not just knowledge but learning from each other throughout the quarter. So it was really, really impressive.
Wow.
On the flip side, I also had one that had absolutely no interaction required. It was, here's the assignment, do it, read the book, and take the exam. So it was night and day difference between the two. You know, and one was a political science class, the other one was a anatomy and physiology class. You know, and the anatomy and physiology class, if you put it in context of just visual, it is really challenging because now you don't have anything to reference when you need it. Like, you know, most of the time we have labs to go and touch and turn and see the 3D and everything else. But they had such an amazing support, the tech part. There was 3D videos and all the gadgets that was really, really cool. So it was very interesting to see the two facets.
Wow, that's great. That validates a lot of what we're saying too.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me about your motivation in terms of the course? Did you feel like one, you were more motivated to go and do than another?
Yeah, hands down. I mean, the A&P, of course, was my area of study because I'm a kinesiologist. So I was already motivated to take the class to begin with, and whereas the other one was more of a requirement. Mm-hmm. But being able to not only give and receive feedback from other students and the professor, it was really neat how easy it was to get a hold of everybody. It wasn't just one person; it was the whole group. We had a specific, you know, layout system that was easy for us to just have feedback almost instantly.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really neat.
Yeah, that'd be great to hear more about. Please tell me about your experience.
Okay, I have completely opposite experience. Mine is the worst class I ever taken, and it was back in 2007, and then when I was in library school, and the library science is big on online education, so and also like they're kind of testing out, and they created this online discussion where you have to post something and you have to at least make 2 replies. And I had a master's degree in different discipline already, so I know that it was a really intense course program. So I know I stayed up really late at night, and which this post is very interesting. But I found that other students were just posting, you know, as a reply, you know, one sentence. Oh, that's a very interesting topic. Period. And the majority of students are like that. And also another frustration was that the instructor made this one-page, single-spaced lecture, and so basically on top of regular reading assignments, we have to read her lecture, and so I'm like, what's the point? I mean, and they also, you know, we already have a reading, and you are just summarizing the reading, or what kind of lecture is this? So that's the worst experience I ever had, and my guess is that she never taught online, or very little experience teaching online, so she didn't know what would be a good online teaching, and I lost faith after that class in online teachings. But the whole, you know, higher ed is moving toward online teaching, so I really want to know what is a good, effective online teaching.
Yes. Do you plan to teach online someday?
I don't want to, but I'll probably have to.
Okay. So somewhere in there you might have to.
Yeah.
And so do you feel that that negative experience provided you with some knowledge about how not to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lecture should not be one page
right.
written summary of the text.
Yes. Anybody take an online course where most of the material was delivered through PowerPoints? Okay, and where's your, Yeah, and what's the problem with the PowerPoint?
You have to do it. Well, I mean, go through each one and it's static.
Well, generally, in terms of PowerPoints, if I were to provide you with a bullet pointed list and just say, here, now, there's the material, what's missing?
The lecture.
The
lecture.
The human the human anecdote, the expertise, all that goes in between it. And so a PowerPoint, for example, is good for organizing your thoughts and for trying to get people to focus for a moment. But the reality is, it's the human interaction and the human expertise that is missing. We often get that. Rex and I talk about this all the time. We often get this where the instructor says, here's my materials. And they hand over 15 PowerPoints and go, that's not it. You know, we need you in there. We need to be able to read something that is a substantial statement of their expertise. So if it's just a summarized reading of the readings, it really isn't enough, right? How could you supplement that? What do you think you could do to make that a more effective teaching tool? You imagine this is just simply a one-page summarization of the reading. How could you take that and improve that? Yes?
So the professor could actually video themselves giving the lecture?
Okay, that is a good start. There's a problem there also. We'll come back to, well, anybody has any other suggestions? Why would lectures not necessarily be ideal? I would say that a lecture is a step up above a PowerPoint. PowerPoint's probably the worst. Nothing is the worst, right? And I've seen classes where there was just simply nothing there. And then the next would just be a series of PowerPoints. And the next would just be a video lecture. That's probably a step up. But there's a problem with video lectures too, and we'll come back to that. What could then you do? What else could you do to improve the quality of this summarized reading kind of lecture or approach to teaching?
What I try to do is like put in relevant links to, you know, current articles or events or things like that, so they can apply it directly to what's going on. So it's actually bringing in more information that they can't just get from reading the book.
Yes, yes. Get the students involved in participating. Get the students involved in creating the teaching and the learning as much as you possibly can. So you are the framework builder. You build the framework, but the students go out and gather the material and bring it back and share it with the rest of the class. That is so much more enriching than you just simply saying, here's the PowerPoint, right? What do you call that when the students go out and gather it and build it themselves? Anybody have any idea about that theory, what we call that? Kendall?
The theory?
Yeah.
Social cognitive theory, or how deep are we going?
Experiential learning?
It might be experiential, certainly. Experiential is a good way to say, let's get them to experience it. If we want the students to build their own learning, we often call that constructivism. They construct it. So a very large part of making teaching and learning effective online. Okay, don't just tell them, get them to go do it. Right? Okay, so in terms of research, definitely it's found. There's got lots of research out there involved in finding out what makes teaching and learning effective and what doesn't. And certainly one of the biggest problems with teaching and learning online is the sense of isolationism. If it's just me in a room with a computer and some data on the computer, it's no different from me just getting a textbook and reading out of the textbook, right? It might be a nice multimedia-based textbook. There might be some videos, there might be some interactive elements. But the bottom line is, it's all about getting people to communicate with other people. Teaching and learning is a very social activity, and this is Dr. Hartley was leading to, is this whole notion of social learning. I think that's where you were going. Very important. So we've got to build those kind of things in. We've got to try to encourage it as much as possible. And just also another theoretical background on this is Chickering and Gampson's 7 principles of good education and undergraduate, of good practice and undergraduate education. Anybody hear this before? 7 practices? Okay, this is really a foundation when it comes to teaching and learning. 7 Principles of Good Practice in Undergraduate Education, Chickering and Gamson. If you haven't heard it before, you'll probably hear it again and again and again. It really is kind of foundational. And you take a look at some of these, you'll see that number 1 is student to faculty contact.
You're going ahead.
Uh-oh, thank you. Can't touch it. I'm getting to see all the preview there. There you go. So, student to faculty contact, number 1, really important. Okay, the students have to feel that you're really there and you really are a human being. It's not just it's just not the student in the textbook. It really is the student and the content and some sort of mentor, some sort of guide, some sort of sage, any of those kind of things, all participating with you. Cooperation among students. Okay, so there's number 2. You see that those 2 right there are the highest in terms of these 7 principles. Okay, so again, this is important whether it's face-to-face, whether it's online, doesn't matter where. These 2 principles are extremely important. And certainly, active learning. That means they actually are doing something, they're applying it, they're experiencing it, they're constructing it. So it's not just passively learning and listening to it. You know, I try to encourage you to tell me about your experiences, tell me about what happened to you, that kind of thing. That's how I'm encouraging it here too. Prompt feedback is really important too. So if the students are asked to do something and they do it right or they do it wrong, it's so important that you give them some feedback on that so they know before you assess. You really can't ask somebody to go learn something and then test them without having given them some practice and an opportunity to know whether they get it or not. It's just not fair, right? So prompt feedback. So these are really important, and like I said, if you don't have these written down, I think you really want to hold on to them. Amber.
Just a quick question as far as feedback. Do you know if students actually go in and read the feedback you give them on their papers? Because I feel like, you know, I do that on every paper, but sometimes I don't think that they read it, and I wonder sometimes the value as far as my time.
Right. I don't.
Okay.
I don't think they do. And it depends. If you are redlining like I used to, take your pen and you redline all over the place, write your marks all over this thing. They look at that, they look at the grade, they throw the paper in the trash, right? I mean, that's generally. So what we do, we encourage is having what are called rubrics. A rubric is some sort of matrix. So here is a matrix of criteria. So if they met this criteria, there's a 1, there's a 2, there's a 3, and these are different sets of criteria. This is grammar, for example, or whether they got the idea. So you got a whole set of these different criteria, and then you can just simply target it. So if you want to save time and you want to give good feedback to your students that's meaningful, you can go down the line, and that really helps them a lot more. It saves you a lot more time, and I believe they look at that more than the red lines.
And if you provide the rubric as they're doing the activity, they can almost pre-grade, because if they take the time to look at it, they know that if I only want to get this grade, this is as far as I go. And then when they want to complain that they didn't meet it, you and they have the basis for the same language, whether they interpreted it the same as you, of what those tiers were supposed to be.
Yeah, I'd even add to that if you don't mind.
Please, please, please.
So I use these a lot, and one of the things that I do is I just bold. I have the text in the matrix there of what it takes to get to this particular, you should have cited 3 sources from such and such to get full points on this, full credit. And then I'll just bold that forward, I'll give them that document back, and what they earned is actually bolded in their document. So I don't have to type this stuff all over again too. That's another thing, I don't know if Mike will get into this, but certainly your efficiency of your time, that's kind of what you're asking. Is it worth my time to be providing all this feedback if you're not? So you have to be strategic about how you use the time. The second thing that I do, not every time, but often, is I'll either ask them to complete the rubric before with the submission, provide a completed one. What do they think they earned on each of these sections? So they either have to kind of all out lie to me in terms of what they did or didn't do, or they have to actually do it in their assignment, which is what they prefer. The second thing is to ask peers to evaluate the project, which sometimes works. It depends on, obviously, the assignment, how well you can do that, but asking peers to do one round of review. I don't teach as much anymore, but teach a design class for desktop publishing, and this is the best thing I've ever done is ask them to have their projects reviewed by 1 or 2 peers before they turn it in, and the quality of the submissions just went up dramatically. Not so much actually because of the peers' feedback, although that helped, but it seemed to up the level of expectations because they were all looking at each other's stuff, and they're like, oh wow, I'm kind of a slacker here. Let's up this and up the end a little bit. So.
And they learn something from each other too.
Absolutely. So
right.
yeah, it goes back to what Mike was saying about social learning too.
Yeah.
So.
So not only did they have to see where they fit into the spectrum, they also looked at 10 or 15 different examples of someone else's work. It's like, oh, I see what they did, so I can now do that. So there's a lot of that social learning involved as well.
Shiora, if you can remember this content based on what you had said earlier, we'll come back to this when we get to discussions.
Okay, so great conversations here. We'll continue to add some of these ideas on the board as we go. Kendall, by the way, I want to mention really quickly, years ago, Kendall and I met, I think, due to a practice that he was doing where for his design courses, what he was doing was he would, he didn't have to sit down with the students, he would open the work that they had done and record what was happening on screen. So if you imagine opening up someone's essay or opening up someone's design project on the screen, recording what's going on and recording the narrative that you're speaking, saying, well, this looks good, but you could improve this over here, saving that short little video of a critique and evaluation, and then letting the students come back and look at it and look at the video themselves. I believe they paid attention to that. Would you say?
Oh, absolutely. I've never had any strategy that got more feedback on my evaluations than the video feedback. And it doesn't have to. It's just a screen capture. You set up a mic on yourself. It's actually on Macs now. I think you can do it with QuickTime. You just record what's there, and then I posted it to Vimeo. You can do the same with YouTube, and then you just either give them a link or embed it in whatever website you're using. And it gives that personal touch that Michael was talking about. They hear my voice. And think about giving feedback too, real in-depth feedback. It takes a lot of time, especially if you have to write out all your comments. So I even do this with rounds of dissertation too, where it's more efficient for me to, as I'm reading, to just talk, articulate my thoughts and suggestions. Because sometimes it's not simply, you need to change this, you need to change that. It's something like, I'm not sure what you're getting at here, Michael. This doesn't flow really well. So it doesn't necessarily mean something has to change, but it gives them a sense of what you're thinking as you go through it.
Saves you a lot of time, right? There's a couple, some software that came out of that was Cam Studio. There's a
QuickTime is a free one.
okay. QuickTime. Camtasia is the one we use over in our office, but it's a commercial product and costs like a couple $100. They're very full featured, but you don't need that to do exactly this technique of a video evaluation. And so there's some of the free ones. There's Cam Studio for the PC, Jing,
Screencast-O-Matic or something along those lines. If you Google that, there's a free version that probably for most of you starting out will allow you to do it quickly, then you can shove it into Web Canvas for feedback from your students, and you can annotate it, etc.
Yeah. Okay, so coming back to this notion of the first week, or the even before then, before the first week of class, this notion of swift trust. And before I go any further, let me ask, when does an online course start in relation to the rest of the semester? Does everybody know?
Is it 2 weeks left?
It's the week before.
Oh, it's before.
So if you imagine here's week 1, students get access to your online class 1 week prior. That's unusual, right? And it used to be 2 weeks prior. So it's now 1 week prior. I don't waste that time myself. I think that is extremely valuable time. So I hit the ground running 1 week prior to the start of the semester. I even have my materials, the first week's materials, available 1 week prior to the start of the semester. I want to encourage them to get in there early, to learn the interface, and to begin to collaborate with each other before the course even starts. So establishing Swift trust is so important. And there is actually some line of research into this notion of Swift trust, where the students want to know you are real. They want to know that you are prepared. They want to know that, that you are there to hold their hands if need be. And so if you wait until the middle of the first week or the end of the first week to establish your presence, you've probably blown the Swift trust possibility. Okay? Don't wait until the end of the first week to have a presence in your online class. Like I said, if I were you, I would start the week before. And in fact, if you can even go back 2 weeks, go back 2 weeks before. So establishing Swift trust is real important. They will trust you more. They will believe that you are a better educator, and probably you'll get higher evaluations if you establish yourself as being there and being prepared at least a week before. The way that I usually do it is the week before the start of the semester, I prepare a welcome letter. And I send out pretty much the same one every semester, and I think I gave out a few. Some of you grabbed them. If you didn't get one, here's a model. This is just mine. You can take it with a grain of salt, but again, you've got to get an idea as to what I'm saying. And essentially what I'm saying is, hi, I'm a human being, number one. That's that picture there. I think the picture is important. They want to know you're a human being. If you put up we have a number of instructors that are currently putting up avatars. This one avatar I saw was of a cat. And an avatar is like a little cartoon image of you. And so the instructor's got an avatar of a talking cat. Well, I want to know that it's a human being, not some sort of computerized animation, right? And so I think it's important you show who you are as a human being. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to show that you're real. So I think it's important you show an image of yourself. What's the course about? What are you going to be covering? What are they going to be responsible for? What's your timeline? How to get started? How to contact you? All of these things are really important. Especially the warmth and sincerity is really important. So this sets up this Swift trust. How do you get their emails addresses before the start of the semester? You go to My UNLV, you log in, you've got your roster there in My UNLV. You can get out their email addresses or use My UNLV to send them an email directly through their system. Sends it out to their rebel mail or whatever. So 1 week before the start of the semester, send out your welcome letter, tell them what the course is about, tell them how you're going to teach it, tell them who you are. That sets up a lot of success right there. That sets up your Swift trust. I also think it's important that you have some sort of welcome, and it doesn't have to be a video, but a video is easy. And the other item that we have, and we may have time at the end of this, if we have any excess time, and I know I'm using up a lot, but the other, something else you can do is create a video. And how many have a smartphone? How many have a smartphone? Go ahead. Tell me, how many, I don't want to ask who doesn't have a smartphone. Did everybody get one of these? Can I pass some of you that? So just about everybody has a smartphone. Does everybody have some sort of application on their phone to record video? I'm going to say you probably do, even if you haven't seen it before. These videos don't have to be professional, right? If you've got a phone, you can create a pretty nice video. Hi, welcome to week 1. This is Michael. I'm here to talk about what we'll be covering this week. Okay? It doesn't need to be long. In fact, it's most important it isn't long. Getting back to the issues of video. There are lots of studies about the attention span of individuals on their computer and watching videos. We used to have streaming videos that would last an hour and a half. Lecture video where somebody talked and talked and talked. What we found is that attention spans drop off at the most, at about 10 minutes. Okay? Down. And in fact, the reality is most people aren't watching after about 5 minutes. And in general, your target should be no more than maybe about 3. So this doesn't have to be something really professional and long. This is just, hi, this is me, I'm here at Starbucks, having a coffee. Now let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing this week. Okay? Very easy to do. And almost all of your cell phones have some way to upload, to share to some sort of video platform, most likely YouTube. And it's really easy to then embed your video directly in Web Campus. There's a little bit of code you copy out of the embed code. You copy out the embed code, you go put it into a page in your course. Boom, now you've got a nice video. Okay, so it's really important that you show yourself talking. Maybe you're just in your living room, you got poor lighting and poor audio. Students don't care. Okay, they just want to see you're a human being. So that's, again, real important that you that you do some sort of introduction. It could be a picture, it could be some text, that's also possible. But video is also a good one too. Also some background into who you are. Okay, what's your area of study? What is it that you are passionate about? What are your hobbies? Do you play guitar? Do you run? You know, what is it that you do? Where's your office? How to contact you? What are your office hours? All of that kind of stuff is real important too. Frequent communication. Okay, this is a really big one too. It's a really big. Student sends you an email. How soon do you think it's important that you respond?
Very.
Very quickly, right? We would say at least in the first week, especially in the first week, communicate within the first 24 hours of getting the email. So so I'm in there when I go into my course, I'm checking my email all the time. I check it at night. I'm terrible about it. I check it at night. I check it in the daytime. I check it all the time. I also give out my home phone number. I give my office phone number. I give them my text. They can text me if they want to. They can chat with me. I give them every single way. I check my email at the university. I give them my personal email. Any way that they want to communicate with me, they can, and I'm there to listen. That, again, is part of that Swift Trust issue. I get some really dumb questions. Anybody get any, this taught before, ever get any dumb questions from students? Sure you do. I get it all the time. And sometimes you kind of want to go, but it's there, it's written down. Two things that come to mind when I get dumb questions. One is, it's not a dumb question. If they have to ask a question, it's because I didn't do something right. I didn't explain it. I didn't make it clear. So anytime somebody asks me a question, I'd say, how can I make sure that question never gets asked again? What can I do in my course to make sure that it's clear? So I never think necessarily those questions are dumb. The other is, sometimes they are dumb, but it's not the question that they're asking. They're sending a ping. Hey, I'm not confident, but I just want to know you exist. I just want to know you are there. I just want to know, are you really there? Is this just, am I still interacting with a computer? Because I'm not going to feel confident, so I'm going to send a ping out to you. And I'm going to send it in the form of a dumb question. Okay, so anytime you get a question that just seems like, oh my gosh, how could you not get this? Realize sometimes it's just human beings trying to make sure that you exist. Okay, so think about those when you get those kind of questions. First week especially, super important that you should prove yourself as a human being. We also have introductory, I asked everyone to turn around and greet each other and find the three Chris's and talk to each other. Super important, and I don't think that in many courses we get instructors who make this, they either delete this, they don't have an introductory, did it again? They either have it, they take away the introductory discussion post, or they don't make it mandatory. Again, I think that if you want to set up a community of learning where people begin to talk to each other and trust each other, it's real important that you just introduce each other. It doesn't have to be super complicated. Just tell me a little bit about, well, I didn't even touch it that time, it just did it from a distance. All right. You got to do it too. Okay, that's the key point here. You've got to also be the one. You've got to be the one to share. Howard Reingold is a researcher. Howard Reingold says you've got to prime the pump. you have to be the one to model the behavior you want from your students. And so he goes in during the first week of class, and he is the first one to post. Not only on the ones where it's just kind of introduction, social building, but also in the assignments. He's modeling what he wants from the students. He's priming the pump. So I'm the first one that I post my introduction. I'm candid, I'm sincere, I'm open, and then the next issue is you certainly want to read and respond to every student post, but not immediately. If you set up a habit of being the first one to respond, no one else responds. They wait for you to do it. So you may post in there, but come back in a couple days. Don't immediately respond. Give them time to talk to each other first. If you're the loudmouth in the room, then they'll just let you be the loudmouth in the room. So you gotta let them talk a little bit. Then come back and eventually respond to every single one. Okay? And definitely make it mandatory and graded. A lot of people, yes sir?
Well, I was just gonna make a comment. So, I mean, some of them might have classes where there's 50, 60 people, and they're posting pretty regularly. So, you know, my lens for discussion participation for the instructors is not unlike what I would do in a physical classroom, which is they're in groups, maybe discussing a topic, and I'm kind of wandering in and out of each of those groups. So I don't necessarily respond to every single post. I do read every post, but you know, just in terms, again, of efficiency, if it's possible to respond to every post, then absolutely that's great. But I think there might be circumstances where that proves to be not possible.
Right. Yeah, that's too much. And then we get back to the rubric also.
Right.
It's important, you know, a graded activity, then you can use the rubric. Otherwise, trying to respond to every single one of them would drive you crazy.
Yeah, and that's about expectations too, right? If the students expect you to read and respond to every message and you don't, then they're going to be disappointed. If you lay out these guidelines ahead of time, it says, look, I am reading everything, but I'm not necessarily responding to everything, then they don't necessarily expect it. And I'd add the same thing to the contact information. Michael's my hero, and he's going to answer things 24/7. I am not. Those of you who know me know that an email after 5 o'clock to me isn't getting responded to until the morning. But I lay that out for students ahead of time too, and certainly modify that. I modify that the first week because you have to be paying attention the first thing week to make sure things are going. At that point, I make sure they understand that this is my job, and this is when I do my job. And let them know when I am checking, so that they're not sitting there waiting at their computer for a reply at 6 or 7 o'clock at night when they know it's not necessarily going to happen. So.
Yeah, with my students in my course, like Dr. Hartley says, I lay down my parameters. So I make it clear that I'm not available on weekends and I'm not available on university holidays. Otherwise, they should expect a regular response from me. And I think the students understand that. I mean, if they have something really serious they need to do with me, they know, okay, 4 o'clock on Friday's coming up, I need to send them the note because after that, I have to wait till Monday.
And of course, it's amazing, we've all had this experience too, where you'll get there's a 6 o'clock message and then there's a 6:30 message that says, never mind, I figured it out.
Oh, yeah.
which is all the more valuable.
Get that all the time. Yeah, you're busy working on trying to find, craft a solution,
Yeah,
and then you send it, and like an hour later, you go, oh, I already got that.
Melissa had a question.
Yes, Rex pretty much hit on something that I've experienced with online classes, and that is I've had professors who you had a feeling that they weren't there, they were not present, and they were gone, and it was later through, and UNLV, students have shared with me, oh, they were at a conference. I've appreciated professors who have gone or who were planning to attend a conference and would say, I will be out of town for the week, I may have a chance to respond to some postings or whatever, you may email me or not email me, I'll respond when you return. So it's important as a student that I know that you're there or not there. Just keep me informed about your presence or not.
That makes sense. Awesome. Everybody know about netiquette? Netiquette is online etiquette. And so it's sometimes important to make sure that, it's very easy to be anonymous online, and it's often, students may feel that it's okay to have kind of strange behavior when they're talking to each other online. They think that there's that sense of anonymity. You're not anonymous at all, especially in online courses. And so it's good to let them know what is good behavior. And we have a statement that is available. It's actually linked in all of the courses. Every course starts off with this link. And so it essentially tells them a little bit about, hey, be cool to each other, be nice to each other. You know, here's some behavior that you probably want to avoid online. So a good way to set them up for some success in that regard. Something else that is, I think, is key. I'm working on a dissertation on this about how you organize your course. You know, I think it's important how you organize your course, and I think that there is a key period of time in which students actually have to expend cognitive energy to figure out how does your course work, right? And so I want them to spend that energy the week before the start of the semester. I can help them by providing materials that tell them how the course works, instead of them guessing. Oh, I have to go check the syllabus every week to tell me what it is I've got to go do, or it's built into modules, or you know, some way I've got to tell them how is this course organized. And so I always try to explain over here in some way in my course, how does this course work? How is it structured? What's the organization? Don't make them guess at it, because they won't figure it out for a week or two, and they've lost that time when they could be learning. And the same can be true with a video. You could create a short course tour. Start here, then go here, that kind of thing. Check your grades here. Nothing complicated. Don't tell them how to use Blackboard. Don't even tell them how to use Web Campus. Just tell them how you're building this course. And I always do module overviews, so that are weekly overviews. Hi, I'm still here. I still exist. What's kind of fun is to go, when you do go to a conference. I was at a conference last summer in Washington, D.C., and I made my module video with the Washington Monument behind me. And the students can see no matter where I am, I'm still here. I'm still teaching. I can be anywhere in the world. You can see me, okay? And I'm still available. This is the one that I think a lot of people forget, and that is that we're responsible for the success of the students as teachers. This is something you do in a face-to-face course. This is something you should do in an online course, and that is if you see that the students are not succeeding, it's your responsibility to intervene, right? That makes sense. So I have seen cases where someone's, in higher education in particular, someone says, oh, they flunked out, that's their fault. I'm not going to nurture them, I'm not going to baby them, they're grown-ups, right? No, it is your job. It's our job as educators to look out for our students, and if they're not succeeding, reach out. I have turned around students who were failing by simply picking up the phone and saying, what's going on? How can I help you? I know I have changed them, or changed their behavior at the very least. Sometimes they say, oh, I'm sorry, I'll get back on track. Boom. Or sometimes they say, things are going on in my life, I just simply can't make it anymore. No problem, let's set up some sort of contract, okay? But can you just wash your hands and say, they didn't show up? No, you need to pay attention. If they don't show up to class, if they're not doing their work, it's on you as a teacher, getting paid to be a teacher, to pay attention and to intervene. Now there are some interesting techniques that you can use in online learning to monitor whether or not the students are actually there. There are tools there. The one's called the Performance Dashboard. The Performance Dashboard, you just click on it, and it'll tell you when was the last time they accessed the course. It'll tell you whether they're actually doing the work. There's also some very detailed course reports, I'm not going to go into them today, where you can get a very fine grain of data to see what did they do, when did they do it, when was the last time they were there. I mean, you could run a full report on every single student or an aggregate of your entire class. Okay, so you've got course reports, the Performance Dashboard, and the Retention Center. Now that's a neat thing. I don't think I know any instructor here yet at UNLV really using this to its full potential. The Retention Center is a way to set up criteria in your class for success. Okay, so attendance, grading, and if they suddenly don't hit that criteria as they work through the course, it sets up a flag and sends you an email, and sends them an email. Okay, pretty cool. So essentially, You don't have to necessarily be the one policing and monitoring everything. You set up in the retention center some criteria for success. And if suddenly, boom, they're not making it, okay, suddenly it tells them, it tells you, and sets up a flag. So let's talk about this. So pretty neat automated feature that very few people are using.
Michael.
Yes, sir.
So the retention center, is that just for online teaching or for any?
No, it's there. If you're teaching a face-to-face course, everyone on campus gets a course shell, whether you use it or not. And if you got a course shell, now the problem is that if the criteria is that they're attending, you have to take manual attendance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if the criteria is that they did some certain grade, they did some sort of work, then you then have to enter it into the system, right?
Okay.
Use the internal grade book. So that's the only difference. If you're teaching face-to-face, you may then have to incorporate some of your grading directly into here. But no, you can use it anywhere. Really important. Yes, ma'am.
On the previous slide, is that when they go specifically into your class or just to Web Campus in general?
Specifically into your class.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all class specific.
I mean, they might not do anything else other than come in, but yes, they have to at least cross your threshold before it registers access to the course.
At the end of the semester, if anybody gets an F, you have to say when was the last time they entered the course. Okay, I don't know if you've seen that before when you're grading. You have to tell them what was the last time they entered the course. It's for financial aid purposes. How do you do that? You go into the performance dashboard. It tells you when there was the last. It's been 56 days since they last entered the course. Okay, simple. Or at least to do. If you haven't heard about this yet, you probably will. Dr. Winklemas here at UNLV has done a lot of research into how we can improve student success. And in particular, she's been doing a lot of work with assignments and how to make assignments more achievable for students. And she's identified 3 different areas. Anytime you give an assignment, most of the time, I see people just simply say, here's the task, go do this, right? But there's 2 other pieces that are really important. Why are we doing it? How is this relevant to what we're supposed to be learning? That's important too. So you give them this kind of metacognitive understanding of why they're doing it. Okay? Align this back with your objectives. Align this back. What's the purpose of this? Tell them why this is important. Tell them exactly what to do and give them some way of knowing how they can be successful. I've heard that this has produced much higher level of your responses, of your assignments from your students, just by doing these 3 things. Purpose, task, criteria for success. I mean, if you haven't heard that before, memorize it. Every assignment, I would say, from now on, try to have these 3 elements. You've got research to back that one up. Rex, I don't know how much time we've got.
We'll just quickly do this and let me tie a number of things together. Chris's video thing, Dr. Harley and our discussion about rubric, and Shori's discussion about the discussion. So one of the ways to effectively add student participation beyond doing APA formatted papers and doing tests is doing some kinds of response things. So these 3 different tools are not exactly the same. Discussion can leverage back and forth between student and teacher, student to student. One of the things that's crucial in terms of being able to develop some useful flow is, one, having a clear idea of what the expectations are on the post that gets the trigger going. I call it an initial post. And then you have your secondary post or the response. You're going to typically get I agree as a response if you don't use a rubric or some kind of matrix to say what is the quality and the content supposed to be of a response to get a certain grade. If they only say, you know, I agree, you might give them 1 point out of 20 because they are alive and put a response in. But if they need to have some depth as well as breadth and get these points, you need to outline what that demonstrates without giving them the answer.
Also, as a technical assist on this, you can make it so that students can't post into a students can't see what anyone else has written until they post themselves.
There's a trigger that you can put into the tool.
So often you'll see somebody post something and then the next person posts something that's almost identical, right? And then the next one's almost identical.
Yeah.
So you can make it so that they can't see anybody else's until they posted their own. And that's a good trick.
So there are different reasons that you'd feel like maybe discussion is not the right tool, but you want to engage the students in some kind of thoughtful input to what's going on without doing a paper. I actually used in my course, an educational assessment course, a journal, and in a lot of our ed-sci courses we call it a learning log. So the students can build responses over time, and I can grade those bits and pieces. And so I build in ways for the students to give me bits and pieces, and since I'm not concerned about the order, and they just shove the whole thing at me at the due date, they can piece their understanding of the different chunks of that unit or module of study they've got, and I go to them. In Web Campus, what's useful about that pieced out item is that each chunk of response I can give a separate response to. So one of the things I do in my learning log is I have muddiest point. So it's actually a lot of work for the students to tell me what they didn't understand in the readings, because that way I can individually give them something targeted to their specific non-clarity that hopefully will enlighten them. I can answer just that on a level. Blogs, I'll turn over back to Michael as a separate tool, but each of these has its own strengths. I think he kind of leverages a different tool, even though there is one built into Web Campus.
Now, Web Campus has a blogging tool, but it really is just sort of a modified discussion tool. It isn't what you and I might consider to be a blog. I use a tool called WordPress, and there are a lot of different blogging tools out there. The beauty of a blog is that students have a way to post something very easily. It uses almost a word processor style interface, so they just post something regularly. They have some control of the look and feel of their home page, and other students can reply. And so I say that every week students have to make 2 posts on the topic and then reply to 3 other blogs. They learn more from each other, and there's more student-to-student interaction just by that than any other tool in my class. They post something, and again, I create the framework of what they're to do. They go out and find something, they bring it back, they report on it, and then they have to read each other's. They've read 10 times more than I ever gave them, right? And then they have to look at each other's, they have to evaluate each other's. I give them a framework for how to evaluate each other's work, how to do this constructively. At the end of the semester, they know so much about each other, and they know so much about each other's work, that they are sad to leave. They're like, oh, I finally got to meet these people. And they've never met them face-to-face in their life, but they know so much more about each other by reading each other's work, commenting on each other's work, replying to their own comments, getting to negotiate what they feel is like their main point and why they said it the way they did. So a blog is a really good structure to give students a way to post themselves, their own work, share it publicly, and then have each other reply to it. So again, you could do the same in a discussion, but
if I can tie up one loose end, when I mentioned Chris's reference to video, while we as instructors can do videos to the students, using any one of these tools, we can also have opportunities for the students to lecture back or present using video from the course. It's another way to confirm that the person that's enrolled in your course is a person who's doing the work.
So can you tell me more about that? Is that so they can post a video? Or?
Yeah, if you happen to have some opportunity to look at where you can type and stuff in Web Campus, you have a little webcam. And if you tie that either to your Rebel Mail account or your UNLV mail account, you click on that, it'll pop up. And you can instantly, without using any special tool, even beyond these ones here, you can just immediately do that. So that's what my students do. This learning log I talk about, 1 of 4 parts. Beyond that muddiest point, they have to do a response. They do up to 90-second one, and they do that. Now I don't have it all the time. I only have 5 of those that I assign beyond the intro, but they can instantly do that. And it gives a more spontaneous kind of response where they're not worried about wordsmithing. They just tell me what they think they know. I think it's more telling than any of the stuff they tied at me.
So this is again the standard text entry box, and it's all over the place in Blackboard. And some of the tools down here that aren't really known that well. Here's one you can actually, if you've got a webcam, the students can simply record their video right here by clicking this button and record their lecture and then put it directly in here. There's also a way to go out and find YouTube videos under this mashup this mashup tool. So if there is a video on YouTube already existing, they can click on that and enter a video into the course itself, as well as Flickr photos and a SlideShare. I don't know if everyone's familiar with SlideShare. It's essentially a place to, it's like a YouTube for your PowerPoints. And lastly, using embed codes, as we mentioned before. Using embed codes is super simple, and you can use the embed code from YouTube just by clicking on this HTML and putting it right there. Okay, how many people are familiar with using embed codes, the YouTube embed codes? A couple of you, yeah. Really easy.
Yeah, it sounds so you know, techy, but it's not that at all. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to try that out. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so nice to be able to do that.
Yeah.
It kind of walks you through anyways. When you upload the video on YouTube, you can automatically copy the embed and just paste it into the directly.
You don't have to understand the code. That's
Yeah.
the
Right. You just copy it and paste it. That's the best part. Okay, so where were we here? There we go. Okay, so I think it's about time for us to wrap up, and certainly we want to wrap up by asking you do you have any contributions, any way you would suggest, in your experience either as a student or as an educator, what tips do you have for nurturing student success, face-to-face or online? Because really they transfer.
So mine's more of a question. I get a lot of students in my face-to-face classroom that talk about how they hate taking online courses, that they're forced to take them because they don't offer them in person. So they're not motivated to engage in the first place. So really what all they want to do is just go on to Web Campus, access the materials, and post and get a grade, done. So how do you really encourage that early participation first off, like a week prior to the semester beginning?
Well, definitely it's good to communicate expectations, and there's the misconception that online courses are somehow a cheaper version of the face-to-face version, right? That somehow this is the easy one, and that's not true. There should be an equal amount of rigor between whether it's face-to-face or online. In fact, hopefully, because we can see the curriculum online, hopefully we can improve that one over time and make it better. And so I think that the start of the semester, before this semester begins, you've got to communicate that expectation. Hey, this isn't going to be any easier. This is going to be pretty tough. And I get that from my students all the time. I didn't realize how hard this was going to be. I really enjoyed it because of this interaction element, but this is hard. And it should be hard. This is higher education, right? So you've got to communicate that. And so if they feel that they're going to take a cheaper version, then hopefully they're wrong. So I think that's important. Did that answer your question? Kind of. Again, engage them early as much as possible. Say, hey, you want to go in there and you want to do this specifically. Most of the time they don't know what it is they're supposed to be doing. Also, face-to-face learning, when there's one model of teaching in which there's the sage on the stage who does all the talking, right? And it's very easy as a student because all you got to do is come in and plunk yourself down and you don't have to do anything. You just listen, right? Passive learning. We don't want passive learning. We want active learning. You are involved in this. And so there's a shock when you go into an online course and you realize no one's just going to talk at you. And you don't just plunk yourself down at the computer and listen. No, you got to do stuff. That's the biggest problem is you have to be highly motivated to take online courses. You got to realize you are in charge of this. That's a total change, total shift for most learners. They want to sit and listen. They want to hear the lecture. They don't want to do anything. Okay, but as soon as you go online, that's all on you. You know, so maybe you got to. Sometimes we have to communicate that, and we have to encourage them to be motivated. Another question.
From the student's point of view, I've always valued and benefited from the introduction. And with the introduction, I usually would discover someone who may share the same discipline as I, and I would single out one or two people to be my online buddy. And if I had a question, rather than shooting it to the instructor, I would feel a little more comfortable initially shooting it out to the student. If it happened to be a stupid question, I wouldn't feel so bad.
No, that's really important too. And something I also encourage everyone to have in their discussions. Certainly you have content-related discussions, but something else is a homework help discussion that isn't graded. And I would say almost, you're right, there's this behavior of I don't want to ask the instructor the question because I might feel foolish in front of the instructor, so I'll ask other peers,
Yeah.
which is fine. And so what I'll find is if I have a homework help discussion forum and I encourage students to answer each other's questions, they'll put questions in there and I don't have to do anything. It's great. The other students will respond. And they have much better responses sometimes, because they're in the same boat. So I think it's really a good idea to have some way for the students to help students. Have a homework help section like that. Yeah, that's great. Any other tips?
I actually have a question.
Caitlin, yes.
What tips do you have for having successful group projects online?
That's a tough one. I think that's one of the hardest ones to do. It can be done. It has to be very highly structured. You have to find ways for people to be accountable. And you have to find ways for people to have roles and be responsible for certain areas and know what each one of their targets are. So it can be done. There's lots of research and there's lots of material actually on how to do it. It's tough. Most often what ends up happening is kind of a mishmash. Okay, here's a group project, you're assigned to it, you, go do it. Well, the students don't know, well, maybe Rex is going to slack and Amber's going to do all the work and she's going to resent it. And you're going to do the other half of the work, but you're going to resent somebody who's not doing it. So define that. What is everyone's role? What do they have to contribute? And then maybe a peer evaluation at the end, right?
I like that.
Yeah, some sort of peer evaluation at the end. It can be done, it's just tricky. And I would have to, and Rex will probably tell you that the tools in Web Campus, not that great.
Yes, I think Michael's thought about the peer evaluation, regardless of any tools you've got, is the saving grace for the Slacker thing. So because you know that even in face-to-face group situations, you have the laggard that doesn't do their work, that doesn't do their share. So if your structure, and I think rubrics can certainly help in terms of defining roles and tasks. I think using those things rather than relying on any electronic tools we may have will be what will add to the possibility of success doing groups, particularly in an online situation.
There's no good tool for it. There's not a button that you can push and make it happen. It has to come from a thoughtful educator who structures it well.
I found with any group projects I do give them the option to work alone. I find most of them do group up, but there's, like you said, if people aren't interested in working with each other, there's just going to be a drag on the group, and they usually turn in better work by themselves. So I do leave that option on all my group assignments.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think it's interesting to think about any of these tools or strategies. What's the point? What's your rationale for it? So why do you feel like there should be a collaborative groups? And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but is this what's the end game here? We're all three of us are instructional designers at heart, and we start with the very beginning. What is the problem? Where are they at? They're at point A, and we're going to get them to point B. Does point B look like somebody who has demonstrated that they can collaborate well? Is that a goal in your course? Or is it really just, well, I thought I was supposed to do group projects? Or why did you have a discussion board? Rex kind of alluded to this earlier. Well, I thought I had to have a discussion, assignments every week because it's a distance ed class. Well, okay, but what are they getting out of that discussion? What's the point? So be very clear about what you hope to accomplish with this, because maybe it could be an individual project, but if it is a group project, certainly you want to follow those guidelines. I'm actually, part of the reason I'm here is not to harp on Michael, but I'm doing the session next week, which is on teaching with technology, and I was going to talk about collaboration tools and that kind of thing at that session as well. So I want to make sure I'm not overlapping too much with what Michael's group is.
Questions? Any questions about online education, how you do it, what's the process, who you talk to, anything like that?
I still have a very, very, very vague idea what the good lecture portion would be, and I'm in history, so like it's really reading heavy, whether it's a primary source or secondary source. So when assigned a basic textbook, and my lecture in class will be kind of fleshed out where that they may have a problem understanding. So, do you think that it's kind of a good idea to have like open book mini quiz as a kind of substitute of lecture portion, just to make sure that they read and kind of have a really, really basic understanding of what they're supposed to.
Well, remember, the lecture doesn't have to be this death by hearing them talk for 45, 55 minutes, because that's what you were used to. I think you kind of answered part of that yourself. You mentioned that you've got this book. They paid good money for that. So are you going to reteach what you made them read in the first place? You focus on the things that you feel that they don't quite get from the book, things that maybe you have a passion about, maybe things you want to dispute, and that's what goes into this video part that's your lecture. And you make that a very concise, succinct chunk of information you share with them, that if you triangulate it, do a Venn diagram of all the materials you make them do, that becomes the full part of your instruction. Book readings, activities, web links that you may provide to bring in to the day, and then that's the big picture. You don't just keep overlapping the same materials that are redundancies of each other.
If I could also talk about like what are the steps in teaching and learning. In a typical lesson, in a typical day, would you just simply lecture? There's other things that go on in there, right? Can I use the board behind you? So, I mean, if we talk about the 9 events of instruction, Gagne's 9 events of instruction, and I'm going to just summarize it. I'm not going to say exactly, exact wording. But when you're teaching, typically you explain what is it you're going to teach. What are your objectives? You start off with that. Okay, so you say, here's what we're talking about today. You maybe put it on the board. Here's the point of what we're doing. And then maybe you have some sort of way to introduce, and often that's something that's very catchy, okay? Elicit prior knowledge. Tell me, I asked a question at the beginning, is how many have taught online? That was my attempt at eliciting prior knowledge, getting you to tell me a little bit about it in my intro. Now the portion you're asking about is really the presentation phase. I'm going to present the information now. It's not the only element of the lesson, it's a piece of it. But then a really crucial one is practice. Can you get the students to practice it, either in a group format or individual? And can you provide feedback, which is really important? That's the big one. So here you presented it, here you got them to do it, and you have corrective feedback. And then you have assessment. Now you're asking about quizzes in that phase, and there's actually a 6th one, and that's opportunities for advancement and remediation. So advancement or remediation. So the people that got it and they really want to learn more, they're so fascinated, how can they learn more just optionally? Or they didn't get it after that process, how can they learn it? So there's your six basic steps right there in a typical classroom lesson. Now, if most people say most people think that's the only one, and it's not. That's just a chunk of what you're doing. And you can do a lot of different things to present that information. You go read this, go watch this, go experience this, go do something about this and bring it back and share it. There's a lot of different ways you can do that presentation. So if you're using assessment, like read this and assess, okay, as your only teaching tools, you're missing a lot of other ones as well. And in particular, this practice one is often what gets left out. So you've got to give them a way You got to show them what you're going to show them and show it, and then tell them what you showed, and then say, okay, now let's go ahead and you practice it, and then let's assess it somehow. Now, your question was in regards to, do you have assessments about the reading? Personally, I have a textbook. It's supplemental. I do the teaching. The textbook doesn't do the teaching. I do the teaching, and I do the teaching primarily by getting the students to do things. I framework my course so that they go out and they construct the information themselves. That's my teaching method. I do have a textbook, and it is worth almost, it's open book, it's open neighbor, it's worth 10 points. They can take it 3 times. I don't care, as long as they get 100%, they show me that they read the textbook. So very low stakes assessments for reading the textbook. Now when it comes to really mastering this information, I would do something of a much higher level than a multiple choice test or a true false or anything like that. Make a project, do something, apply it somehow. That's the bulk of my course right there. That's the biggie. They got a lot of writing, a lot of reading, and a lot of responding to do. Show me that you did it. Do it in a project that you built over time. So there's some high stakes that involves really building up all of this together. So, but that reading, just reading the textbook.
Yeah, I do 3, 4, 5 all together in class, and because I do lots of discussion questions in class. So yeah, and then I get the sense during discussion who did the reading, who didn't, then what they have trouble, what's not. So yeah, I rarely do quiz in class actually.
Right.
Because I
It's just a
discussion and stuff.
So my answer would be yes. You can still have those little quizzes, but they're so low stakes. It's just to motivate them to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I know, right?
You know, they can still pass the class if they
Yeah,
really have to. Questions?
One thing I would just throw out there for us to note too is the nature of your online class can vary. So I've known grad students who were teaching prepackaged online courses for other places, and they didn't have to do a whole lot of behind the scenes thinking and conceptualizing in the first place. I designed 2 300 level classes from scratch for which there were no obvious textbooks to build from. That was a huge amount of work. One of those amounted to half of a book of thought, effectively. So those are very different beasts that you're beginning with. And so the nature of what you're teaching online will also be sort of specific to the course and how much effort it takes for even deciding on the body of materials that becomes your sort of presentation itself. So it's just worth saying that for the record too, that these are all distinctions as well.
Absolutely. And while we were trying to really distinguish between teaching and building, course building is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of work. I'd say, Amber, you've built it. How long would you say it takes?
It took a long time.
It's about, I believe that it takes 1 week of development for 1 week of instruction. So if you're going to teach a 15-week class, at minimum, you're going to need 15 weeks to build it before the start of the semester.
Yeah, as a graduate student, I would hope that you're not being tasked with building a whole lot of content. My hope is that if you're assigned to a class, there's a shell already available that they can copy over for you and something to start with. I know that's not always reality, but you know, that's my graduate college voice talking there. I hope you're not being tasked with building brand new classes from scratch.
I would agree with Kendall's point. And it's just that behind the shell you may be given, there was a lot of thought.
Right.
Yeah.
Amber was in that position. She built a course.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it'll be helpful on the job market.
Yeah, it's a great experience, there's no doubt. And ultimately, yeah, you'll need to do that, obviously, eventually.
Any other last questions? Any observations? Yes? Yes, sir.
I was going to ask, what have you guys seen that has not worked? What, just in terms of, we've talked about principles for success, but without sort of identifying individuals or anything. But what are some examples of the worst things we can do?
You're not allowed to use this.
I won't use that. No, your courses are awesome, so I appreciate that. No, I'll give a negative example, and this was this notion that an online course is clockwork, and that you wind it up and you let it go and you come back. I got a call, this was a couple years ago, and it's no department that if anybody here has probably gone to, but I got a call from the Office of Academic Affairs saying what's wrong with this course, that 90% of the students failed. Okay, what happened was that the instructor was not a seasoned online educator, had been given a course shell that was already pre-populated, and the instructor came in the first day and wrote a few notes. Hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and let the course go. And did not return until the end of the semester, 15 weeks later. And I came back and saw that all of these students had not done the work, and so he failed them all, except for maybe 10%. Okay, now the puzzler was, how did 10% pass? Okay, so think about that. So I went into the course to figure out what was going on. There were no discussion forums except for what was then a default that we delete. The instructor didn't delete the default discussion. And the students were panicking, and oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, I'm lost, and I've emailed the instructor, no response, blah, blah, blah. There was like 100 posts in this default discussion. And it turned out that the instructor was using textbook materials. And most of the assignments and the assessments and the presentation of the information were all on the publisher's website. And the key to get into the publisher's website was incorrect.
Oh,
okay.
wow.
So here are the students trying to find out how to learn and how to do the activities and how to take the assessments, and never got in.
Jeez.
Never got in. Now again, the question is, how did 10% pass? I have no idea, right? So that is a negative example of somebody believing it's a clockwork mechanism. You are the instructor. Nothing will ever take your place, okay? Nothing. You have to go in there. You are still a teacher. That's really important. So there's my negative example.
Now, just from personal experience, I know when I first started teaching distance ed classes, I was very sensitive to this idea that this was going to be the easy route or something. So we wanted to make sure there was plenty of rigor. Well, you can overdo that, you know, and it's easy to really overwhelm the students with so many activities and so much going on because you think you have to, you know, up the ante a bit because you're not meeting. But it's, I mean, still, I do still use the lens though that, hey, if this is, you'd still be meeting, we have several hours of meeting time, and then of course the traditional face-to-face class, you'd have another 2 or 3 hours for each hour where there's homework. So there's a lot of time you can think about them using, but you don't have to kill them either. And kill yourself too. I think it's important to think about how to be efficient with these so that you can do these in a timely manner where you get regular feedback to them. Keep in mind, feedback to the entire class hits everybody all at once. So those messages to the entire class, you know, they can be personalized too. I don't know how that works with Blackboard, but certainly you can do that with other tools too. So they still feel like it's a one-on-one interaction, even though it's something you blasted out to everybody.
So I have one question before we go. So in my department, I know that we deal with a lot of shells, both for our 101 classes and even for our like 400 level classes online. They're often made by professors and kind of handed off to graduate students after the first year. So, and I happened to take one of those classes a semester or two ago, and I didn't feel very personally related to the instructor, in part because I knew that it was basically copy pasted, and then like he just kind of copy-pasted it, and there was the class, and then he ran the class. And when I met him in person, everything was great. You know, he's a great instructor and whatnot. But had I not done that, I would have felt no connection to the course whatsoever. So I guess my question is, how do you take those sorts of shells that departments design and turn those into something that is more personalized to your instruction style and also to your students?
Mm-hmm. So there are a number of different models here at UNLV of how departments have faced that issue. If it's just this one master that is uniform, it doesn't have any personalization, right? So what you do is, if you've got one model is if you have 15 weeks and there are 15 modules thereabouts, that instead of having 15 modules you have 20 or you have 30, and the person who teaches the course gets to say, I'm going to move this one in, I'm going to move that one in, I'm going to take this one out. So they get a chance to customize what that looks like. So the departments create additional modules, alternate modules that focus on your area of expertise. And maybe you can propose, I'd like to customize this. Another way is to take one module and to have placeholders for assignments or presentations. So here's the core, so you don't have to do all the work, but we leave little placeholders for you to customize as the instructor, timely, activities or something like that. And then the last method that I've seen before is really to have a buffet of materials that are in the wings, and you, as the instructor, pull this material out as needed from the buffet. I'd say that one gives you the most flexibility, but it's also the most amount of work. Okay, so it may not work. And so ultimately, the best way is to just have more material that you need and be able to have some flexibility with placeholders to make some customizations. And certainly, those elements of personality that go into the course too. I would be willing to bet that person didn't have any videos, didn't have any introduction letters, and you didn't see their presence in the forums or things like that. So that also is really important.
I think another thing, and I think Amber can confirm this, is that if the course is intended to be deployed by multiple other people than the person who envisioned it, if you build in this kind of repository of instructor resources that includes how the course is supposed to be structured and what are non-negotiables and what has to be deployed to all the students, that gives you the freedom as the instructor of record to add to that without moving away from the intent of what the core part of the course is supposed to be. And that way, when you move the course along, it doesn't devolve, so it's like a telephone or operator game. It gets passed on and it gets further and further away from the original intent. You at least know where you're supposed to start, and if you want to make a change, you come back to that core and then build out from there, rather than just keep extending away and away on tangent upon tangent upon tangent.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Fantastic.